Hello, everyone. Today, you're not sitting in your living room or lying comfortably in bed. Tonight, you're something else entirely. You were born not to rest, not to choose, not even to dream. You were born, owned. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time is it. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights and let's drift back to chains, to sails, and to silence. The first thing you feel isn't fear, it's salt. It coats your lips and creeps into the tiny cuts on your wrists, where the shackles rub. Your ankles, raw from days of shifting metal, throb quietly. A background ache, like a drum you've stopped listening to. You don't know how long you've been on this ship. Time folded in on itself after the first storm. The planks beneath you are slick with seawater, sweat, and the kind of human filth no one talks about. Around you, other bodies slump, breathing, not speaking. There are no common words here, just eyes, wide, confused, empty. You were taken. From where doesn't matter anymore. Maybe it was a village on the edge of a fading empire, maybe a battlefield, maybe a coastal raid. What mattered is that you were healthy, strong, worth transporting. The Romans had a word for you now. Service, slave. But you weren't even called that, not yet. Just a number on a manifest, a body in a hold. A commodity shipped like olive oil or amphorae, useful, disposable, cataloged. When the ship docks, there's no ceremony, no grand arch of triumph. Just noise, carts, shouting, footsteps over stone. Rome, it smells like ambition. Crushed grapes underfoot. Dust. Smoke. And above all, people. So many people. They move with purpose, like ants who know the direction of the sun. You're marched through streets where no one looks you in the eyes. Naked or nearly. Not for humiliation, but for appraisal. Like livestock. Eyes glance over your teeth, your limbs, your back. Hands prod your stomach, your shoulders. Whispers follow. This one might do. Strong enough. Looks like gall. Soon you're sold. Maybe to a rich patron. Maybe to the state. It doesn't matter. You're escorted through gates into a high-walled compound. This will be your world now. You can't read the sign, but it says Ludus Magnus, the great school, for gladiators. Inside, you meet silence again. Not from absence, but from discipline. Men train in dust-covered yards. Their bodies are marked. Scars that tell stories in a language you have yet to learn. Their eyes flick to you, then back to their drills. You're no novelty here, just new meat. A man approaches. He's not large, but he carries a staff and wears a stripe of authority. Doctore, they call him. Trainer, executioner, philosopher. He will teach you how to survive, or how to die beautifully. He speaks Latin, sharply. You understand nothing, but the gesture is clear. Strip, wash, eat, obey. Your days begin to fall into rhythm. Wake before the sun. Spar, bleed. Eat gruel thick as paste. Carry weights. Memorize commands. Obey. Bleed again. Collapse. Sleep. Repeat. There is no why, only how long. Sometimes you think of the place you came from, the way the air smelled after rain, or the voice that called your name. But Rome has no use for names, only labels. Some of the others speak your tongue, or close enough. In stolen moments, you learn what they know. This Ludus trains men for the arena, the grand one, the Colosseum, Amphitheatrum Flavium, where 50,000 eyes watch you fight. where a thumb up or down weighs more than years of breath. You are being shaped, not to be a person, but to be a spectacle. Your sweat is currency now, your pain, applause, and yet something strange begins to form. A pride, not in what you are, but in surviving. In lifting your head 1 second longer. In learning the rhythm of a sword swing. In the silence between strikes. You're not yet a gladiator, but you're no longer only a slave. The sand will come, the crowds, the roar of beasts and men. But for now, in this liminal space between man and myth, you breathe in the iron-scented dawn and wait. There are walls around you now, high, sun-bleached, and indifferent. They enclose a world entirely unlike the chaos of Rome's streets. Inside the ludus, time behaves differently. Outside, senators plot and merchants shout. But in here, every hour belongs to discipline. You sleep on a straw mat, shoulder to shoulder with other men. Some snore like they've forgotten the weight of fear. Others lie awake, eyes wide in the dark, listening. Not for sounds of comfort, but for footsteps. Footsteps might mean punishment. Or worse, selection. The walls are painted with ochre dreams and fading gods. Murals of Mars and Hercules, models of strength carved into stone. You do not see yourself in them, not yet. At dawn, the doors groan open. Cold air rushes in, tinged with iron and dust. A horn sounds once. Training begins. The yard is a cruel geometry. Sand raked smooth, wooden weapons stacked in rows, and shadows of punishment posts cast long across the ground. Instructors stand like statues, faces unreadable, voices sharp. They don't call your name. They call your number. Wooden swords first, not to protect you, but to teach you humility. You swing wrong and the pain is immediate. Not from an opponent, but from the doctor's staff, a reminder. Your body is a tool. Precision matters. Sloppiness is punished, not corrected. Pugna sicut victorus es, he shouts. Fight as if you intend to live. Some men crack. They sob, collapse, are dragged away. Not everyone becomes a gladiator. Some become examples. The rest of you learn quickly. There are ranks here. Not all slaves are equal. Veterani, seasoned fighters, get extra rations. Some wear jewelry, gifts from fans. A few walk with a swagger that defies their shackles. Others keep to the shadows, eyes cold, lives measured in matches. You learn to observe, to mimic, to endure. Midday brings food, beans, barley, meat when luck visits. It's not indulgence, it's maintenance. You are an investment. The lanista, your owner, keeps you fed because broken tools do not entertain crowds. And crowds are everything. In the afternoon, the drills change. You spar in pairs. Shields clash. Wooden blades thud against flesh. Blood appears. Sometimes yours. Sometimes theirs. Falling is a lesson. Rising, a demand. At dusk, you're allowed to rest. Not because they care, but because muscle needs sleep to grow. You lie on your mat, ribs bruised, arms trembling, eyes staring at a ceiling that never comforts. There are rules. Unspoken ones, too. Never challenge a veteranus unless invited. Never speak against the doctor. Never show weakness unless you're willing to pay for it. Sometimes, at night, the guards speak in low tones near the gate. You hear them laugh. A joke about a new recruit who won't last the week. You don't know if it's you. You don't ask. The next morning, another man is missing. No one mentions it. Punishments are swift. A misstep in formation, a blow struck too wildly, refusal to train. All earn the lash or time in the darkness, a pit below the ludus floor, where you sit in silence and sweat, and your mind turns on itself. But there are rewards too, if you fight well, if you learn quickly. A softer mat, better wine. Occasionally, a visit from the outside, admirers, merchants, even noble women curious about the men behind the armor. These moments feel unreal, like echoes from a life you never had. At night, some whisper about freedom. Arudus, the wooden sword granted to a man who has survived enough fights to earn release. It's rare. Fewer than you can count on both hands. But the stories persist. Because hope is harder to extinguish than breath. You begin to change. Not just in body, though your muscles now speak a new language of power, but in mind. You learn rhythm. You anticipate blows. You see the space between attacks, the gap where survival lives. You're becoming something Rome loves and fears. But you are not yet ready. Not until the gates open, and your number is called not for training, but for the arena. You are no longer flesh and thought. You are material being shaped for use. Each morning confirms it. Your limbs don't feel like your own, not because they're numb, but because they answer commands before your mind does. You rise when told. You eat when allowed. You sweat on command. In the ludus, instinct becomes your master. They feed you like livestock, not to nourish, but to fatten. Barley gruel thick with oil, chunks of dried fruit, sometimes meat that is more tendon than flesh. No luxury, but calculated fuel. Every bite is a calculation. Calories weighed against spectacle. Rome doesn't want athletes. Rome wants survivors with scars. Your belly grows. Not into softness, but into bulk. You are a beast of burden now, bred for a theater of violence. The body becomes your currency. You start to notice changes in the mirror, if you're ever allowed one. Shoulders widen, hands harden. Even your gait shifts, more grounded, cautious, alert. The old you, the boy who once ran for joy or swam in a river, is distant now. That life feels like it belonged to someone else. Training is constant. Blades replace wood. Shields gain weight. You're drilled until your mind detaches from pain, until your muscles carry the memory of moves before you speak them. Your fingers thicken. Your knuckles split. They wrap your hands in leather, not to protect, but to hide the wounds. Rome does not like to see weakness, only triumph. They teach you styles. Thraex, Myrmio, Retiarius, each with its own weapons, movements, armor. You're fitted into one, not by choice, but by body type. A tall man becomes a net fighter. A broad one, a shield bearer. You adapt or you vanish. The doctor walks among you with eyes like knives. He sees everything. A dropped elbow, a hesitation, a doubt. He speaks sparingly. Praise is rarer than sleep. But one day, he stops at your side, watches a combination of strikes and nods. Not approval, not even recognition, just enough. Enough to be sent to the next phase. They test your pain threshold. Cuts, burns, pressure points. Not to punish, to measure. How much agony will you endure before breaking? Rome needs to know. Rome invests in its blood shows like a banker watching dice. Some nights, when you lie back on the coarse wool of your sleeping roll, you notice something strange. The quiet, not outside, The yard still echoes with coughs and groans. But inside you, there's a hush, as if part of you has gone silent, the part that once asked, why? This is how you become something else. The lanista begins showing you off. Wealthy patrons visit, examining the fighters like horses at auction. Some place bets on your first match. Others offer coin for private viewings. You stand still while they discuss your muscles, your scars, your odds. You are discussed like a meal, not a man. And still, a part of you wants to prove them wrong. Or right. You don't know which. But you want to be seen. Not as a number, but as the thing they paid to witness. Perhaps this is how the mind survives. It adapts not just to captivity, but to performance. You learn to perform fearlessness. You rehearse glares, stances, war cries. The crowd will want drama. They need to believe that what they see is not death, but glory wearing a mask. So you prepare your mask. And the soul? That's the trade. You sell pieces of it day after day, in exchange for a body the empire finds worthy. You store what's left in the corners of your mind, behind memories of sunlit fields and voices that called you by name. But Rome does not pay for souls. It pays for shows. And soon, you will be the show. You weren't meant to bond with them. That's what the lanista wants you to believe. That camaraderie is weakness. That trust is a flaw. That if you grow too close, the arena will punish you for it. But human nature, even beaten and starved, still reaches out in the dark. At first, there are only glances. Caution sharpened by necessity. In the yard, you'll learn faces before names. The tall one who never misses a parry. The quiet one who limps but moves like wind when it matters. The one with laughter buried behind a scowl. You don't speak much, but pain speaks in universal tones. When someone winces as they lower themselves onto straw, you understand. When someone hides a wound during inspection, you offer a scrap of cloth without words. These small acts become currency, the first bricks of something like friendship. There's Cassius, an ex-legionnaire who killed a centurion in a brawl. They didn't execute him. He was too valuable. Instead, they made him a gladiator. He doesn't talk about the past, but he tells you where to place your feet when facing a secutor. He treats advice like gold, rare, hard, and always earned. Then there's Nico, young, fast, barely more than a boy, stolen from the eastern provinces. His Latin is broken, but his laughter cuts through the yard like birdsong. He teaches you to dodge rather than block. You teach him how to bind a cracked rib. You both pretend not to notice that he's growing quieter each week. You learn that rivalries are allowed, encouraged even. They make for good fights. The lanista sets wagers on sparring matches. Sometimes the doctor smiles when tempers flare. It's profitable when grudges bloom. But some grudges turn fatal. One evening, 2 men argue over rations. The next morning, one is found with his throat cut, hidden behind the weapon racks. No one claims to have heard anything. No one cries. You learn to balance closeness with calculation. Trust, but lightly. Protect others, but no. If you face them in the arena, one of you may have to kill the other. Still, the bonds form. Not just over shared meals, but shared silences. You sit side by side in the baths, steam rising around your bruised bodies, saying nothing and everything. You hear stories in fragments. A daughter left behind. A vineyard once owned. A brother executed. No one tells the full tale. The past is a wound best pressed gently. And yet, in stolen moments, over a slice of fig, during the scrape of blade against whetstone, someone might offer a truth. I used to sing. My wife thinks I'm dead. If I win 5 matches, I get my freedom. These aren't confessions. They're anchors. Bits of humanity tethered to men being turned into myths. There's a ritual now. Each night before sleep, you press your hand to the wall. Just once. No reason. But the others begin to do it too. A silent pact. A reminder. I was here. I existed. I endured. When new recruits arrive, wild-eyed and shaking, you become the one who teaches them how to wrap their hands, how to breathe through the pain, how not to show fear when the doctor stares through you. You didn't plan to become a brother to these men. But in a world designed to break you, the act of caring, even briefly, becomes an act of defiance. And one day, you realize something strange. You're not just surviving. You're remembering names. You're laughing, even if just once. You're dreaming, not of freedom, perhaps, but of the next match. Because now, someone will be watching. Someone who would mourn if you fell. And that, in Rome, is power. The city of Rome is a beast in itself, vast, restless, always hungry for something. For food, for gossip, for blood. You notice it first in the markets. There, among the smells of roasted garlic, sweat, and olive oil, posters flutter in the breeze. Painted with red ink and black lines, they show figures mid-strike, shield raised, sword poised, names scribbled in thick strokes. Names like Hilarus, Spiculus, Flamma. Names that echo through alleyways like whispered legends. One day, you see your own. Just a sketch, really? Your jawline made square, your posture heroic, exaggerated for effect. But it's you. Beneath it, your fight is listed. The day, the hour, your opponent. The crowd will know. Strangers begin to stare. Not with recognition, but expectation. You're not a man to them. You're a role. In the Thermae, the great Roman baths, whispers float between splashes and steam. He's fast, that one from the east. I saw him take down a Retiarius with one blow. They say the big one fought 3 men at once. No one cares if it's true. The myth is more important than the man. Children carve figures of clay, pretending they're you. Drunken spectators shout your name in taverns, betting on your death with coin and laughter. Some even paint your likeness on walls, alongside gods and emperors. For a moment, you're immortal, in pigment, in rumor, in dream. But fame is a fickle master. In the Subura, Rome's teeming neighborhood of chaos and vice, the same voice that cheers your skill may call for your blood if you hesitate. You are beloved, conditionally. Survive well, and you're a hero. Falter, and you're nothing but spoiled meat. You begin to understand. Your pain feeds the city. The empire distracts its people with bread and circuses. Panem et circense. And you're the circus. Your broken bones are civic entertainment. They've made you a paradox, both admired and owned, idolized and caged. Some women send letters, scented and sealed, calling you beautiful, not for who you are, but for the danger you represent. Others offer coins to see you up close. Sometimes they send gifts, a ring, a scarf, a poem. You never respond. You're not allowed to. But part of you wonders if they'd still write if they saw you limping back to the barracks, ribs bandaged, mouth bloodied. In the temples, priests preach of Roman virtue, bravery, sacrifice, discipline. And yet, when you fight, even the priests come to watch. Some call it holy, others carnal. No one calls it what it is: survival, dressed as honor. You meet senators, not personally, never. But you see them in the stands, cloaks trimmed with purple, eyes glazed with wine and boredom. They speak of law and empire by day, and scream for death by night. Once, during training, the doctorate tells you something almost like a secret. Know your audience. They want blood. But more than that, they want a story. Give them both. And so you do. You learn how to fall, how to roar, how to pause before a final blow, letting silence stretch just long enough to make hearts skip. You are a craftsman now. Your medium is agony, your art, the illusion of choice. And what of those like you? The ones who walk Rome's streets not as citizens, but as property. Slaves, laborers, foreigners with broken sandals and backs bent by debt. What do they see when they see you? Hope, perhaps? A fantasy of rising, if only by spectacle? Or resentment? That you are fed better, clothed stronger, paraded like a prince while they sweep forums and scrub baths? Some avert their gaze. Others nod. A few even whisper, "I saw your match." And when they do, you stand taller. Not because of pride, but because for a moment, you remember you exist beyond the sand. Rome listens to your grunts through the tunnel walls. It hears your screams before your sword even leaves its sheath. The city knows your rhythm. It breathes in your fear and exhales applause. But behind that thunder, there is something else. A silence. It comes at night, when the streets empty and the echoes fade. When the masks fall, when the Colosseum stands cold and empty, like a skeleton waiting to be filled. In that silence, you wonder. If the crowd knew your name, your real name, the one before chains, would they still cheer? If they saw your hands tremble after the match, would they still call you strong? If they knew what it cost you piece by piece, would they still clap? Or would they simply turn and wait for the next show? And yet, when dawn breaks and the posters go up again and your name returns to the lips of strangers, you rise, you wrap your wrists, you sharpen your blade. Because in a world where your body is not your own, sometimes fame, even hollow, even fleeting, is the closest thing to freedom. It begins before the sun, not with a trumpet or a shout, but with stillness. The kind of stillness that makes your skin tighten. The kind that lives just before something ends or begins again. Today is your day in the arena. You've known for a week. The doctor read your name aloud with the slow gravity of a sentence. Since then, every night has been both a rehearsal and a reckoning. You've imagined the heat of the sun on your back, the roar of the crowd as your foot touches sand, the weight of your opponent's breath across the space between you. But now, it's real. The cell door creaks open. The guard doesn't speak. He never does. You rise, not because you're ready, but because readiness is a myth. You were trained to respond, not to question. In the dressing chamber, the world becomes ritual. A slave applies oil to your arms, not for comfort, but to gleam under the light. Another tightens the leather straps of your armor, pulling until it pinches. One straps your sandals. Another ties the greaves to your shins. They touch you as if sculpting a statue, not preparing a man for war. Each motion is precise, efficient. They've done this hundreds of times. They know where the blood will collect. You don't speak. You focus on your breathing. In, out, again. Your weapon is placed in your hand. It is not yours, not really. You don't get to choose your sword. Rome chooses. Spectacle decides. Today you fight as a murmillo, heavy helmet, short sword, tall shield, a style of power, of endurance. You think briefly of Nico, how he danced with a trident, barefoot, laughing in the dust. You will not dance today. You will endure. Outside, the city stirs. You hear it first in murmurs, then drums, then horns. The festival has begun. In the forum, crowds shuffle toward the great amphitheater. Vendors shout about dates and honeyed wine. Children clamber over one another for better seats. The scent of roasted meat mingles with horse sweat and perfume. But here, underground, it smells only of damp stone and old blood. You line up with others in the passage. Each face is a mask, some whisper prayers to Mars, to ancestors, to forgotten gods of mud and hill and fire. Some remain silent. A few smile, not out of joy, but reflex. Nerves have strange disguises. Your heart doesn't race. It waits. It knows what's coming, and it's listening. The tunnel ahead yawns open. Light spills in like gold poured from the heavens. And with it, sound. A roar. Not of war, but of hunger. 50,000 voices layered like thunder over water. You don't hear words, just force, energy, a presence. Rome has gathered, and Rome wants to see blood. Then comes the voice, not a god's, though it might as well be. The emperor speaks, high above in marble and gold. He lifts his hand. You do not look directly at him. You look just below, always below. He says your names, your origins, your styles. You are no longer a man. You are an offering. You step into the sand. It burns your souls at first, the heat rising from below like a warning, but you barely feel it. Your helmet limits your sight, your breath, your world. You focus on the circle in front of you, the boundary, the theater, the trap. Opposite, your opponent emerges. You've seen him before, a veteran. His helmet is notched, his shield scarred. He moves like someone who has killed more times than he can count and survived by counting only what matters. You meet his eyes. Just for a second. There is no hatred, no malice, only agreement. We do what we must. The horn sounds, and the world disappears. Later, you will not remember every move, only fragments, the hiss of a blade across your shield, the grunt as your feet dig into the sand, the metallic taste when a blow jars your jaw, the crowd, always the crowd, a sound like weather, shifting, rising, falling, cheering when you land a strike, booing when you hesitate. They don't care if you live, only that you perform. You are art and war and suffering wrapped in motion. You are what they came to see. Time folds. You don't know how long it lasts. Minutes? Eternity? The arena distorts time, the way pain distorts space. But finally, your opponent falls. Not dead, not yet, just vulnerable. His weapon skitters across the sand. His shield drops. He kneels. And you raise your sword. You look up. To the emperor. He waits. The crowd waits. Thumb up or down. Life or death. A decision made in the flick of a wrist by a man who does not know your name. Today, the thumb turns. Up. You lower your blade. Your opponent will live. For now. And so will you. Back in the tunnels, the silence returns. But it is different now. Not empty. Full. Heavy with exhaustion, sweat, and something stranger. Relief? Triumph. You survived. Others did not. You do not rejoice. You do not weep. You remove your armor. You sit in the dust. You press your forehead to the cool stone of the wall and close your eyes. Outside, Rome celebrates. The crowd disperses. The city swallows your story whole. But inside, the echo remains. You were there. You stood in the center of the world, and you lived. You don't just fight in the Colosseum, you are swallowed by it. It is more than a building. It is a body, a creature of stone and shadow and sound, with bones of travertine and skin of marble dust. A mouth that opens wide to consume noise, blood, and breath, and calls it glory. Today, you're not just entering a structure. You're being devoured by history itself. They call it the Amphitheatrum Flavium. But to the people, it is simply the Colosseum, the Colossus. It rises from the earth like a second sun, round, impossibly vast, layered in arches that echo the heavens. At its peak, awnings ripple like sails. Below, thousands swarm, senators in silk, vendors with amphorae, beggars, gamblers, lovers, a sea of flesh drawn to a stage of death. The gates are iron jaws. There are 80 entrances. One is for the emperor, one for the dead. You don't get to choose yours. You are led through the Porta Libitinensis, the gate of corpses. It's a warning. Many enter. Few exit the same way. The tunnel is long, cold. The sound of footsteps bounces off the walls. Yours, your opponent's, the guards. But the noise ahead is louder. A low growl. Then a roar. You emerge, and the Colosseum breathes. The noise is not just volume, it's weight. It presses on your ribs, vibrates in your spine. 50,000 voices layered in anticipation, joy, cruelty, awe. You look up, and the world curves above you. The stands rise like terraces of judgment. At the bottom, the emperor's box, cloaked in gold and ivory. Around it, senators, priests, magistrates. Beyond them, merchants, soldiers, artisans, mothers. At the top, the poor, the slaves, the restless. Each tier, a mirror of the empire's bones. But all of them, looking down, at you. The sand is not ordinary. It's dyed. Red, yellow, white, depending on the occasion. Sometimes they scatter saffron or rose petals before a grand event. Today, it's ochre to hide the blood. Beneath the sand, a labyrinth, wooden elevators, trapdoors, cages. You can hear the growl of a lion below, the rattle of chains. Somewhere, a mechanism clicks. The arena is not just open space, it's alive, a stage that can shift, bleed, or betray. You know this, but you don't show it. You stand where thousands have died, where names were cheered, and then forgotten. Look around. There are scratches in the stone where terrified fingers once clung. There are carvings, hearts, curses, prayers. You imagine a fighter like you once waiting here, heartbeat like thunder, whispering a name just before the gate opened. The architects say the Colosseum was a marvel, that it could empty in minutes, that its velarium shaded the crowd with engineering brilliance. But you feel something else. It was built not just for function, but for dominance, to make you feel small, to make your death look beautiful. The acoustics are flawless. When the emperor whispers, even the furthest seat hears. When the crowd laughs, it ripples like fire through wheat. When the executioner's axe falls, The sound lands in every stomach. You are not alone, but you've never felt lonelier. You're trained to ignore fear. But here, in this amphitheater of giants, fear is not weakness. It's worship. Even your opponent seems humbled. Not by you, but by the space. He crosses himself in the old way, mutters a word in a forgotten tongue. You nod. Not in friendship, in recognition. You are both prey now, beneath the gaze of the beast. Above, a signal is given. The games begin. The air shifts. Trumpets blare. Drums thunder. The gate creaks open behind you, and the Colosseum exhales. The wind that rushes past is not wind. It's breath. The breath of thousands. Your footsteps press into the sand. You feel its heat, its weight, the stories it holds. You remember. This arena was once flooded to reenact naval battles. They sailed warships through where you now stand. Rome does not merely conquer. It reenacts its power again and again until even memory submits. You take your position. The crowd hushes. A bird calls overhead. A child cries in the distance. And then, silence. The kind of silence that only comes before chaos. You lift your shield. Your opponent lifts his axe. The sun strikes your helmet. And the Colosseum, ancient and endless, waits to feed. There's no ceremony to the first blow. No music. No moment of grace. Just metal meeting metal and a ripple of sand. Your shield jerks as the impact lands. You stagger, not from pain, but from surprise. He came faster than expected, your opponent. A secutor, broad and brutal, with eyes narrowed through his smooth, rounded helmet. He swings again. This time, you're ready. The fight is not dance. That's a lie told by poets. It is breath, shortened. It is sweat running into your eyes. It is instinct drilled into nerve endings until your limbs react faster than thought. Each second, you calculate. Distance, angle, wind. The sun is at your back now, a minor gift. It blinds him when you step to the right. You pivot, strike low. He parries, but not well. Your blade slices fabric, not skin, not yet, but close. The crowd roars. Not for you, not for him, for the moment, for the smell of danger in the heat. The sand is treacherous. It shifts. What was stable one step ago is suddenly loose, soft. You compensate? Lower your center. Move in half circles, never straight. He charges. You brace, absorb it with your shield. The jolt sends lightning through your shoulder, but your feet hold. You twist, hook his arm, shove. He falls, just for a breath. But that's all it takes. You press in. Strike again. Blade to shield. Blade to armor. Blade to flesh. The cut is shallow across his thigh. But blood is blood. The sand accepts it like tribute. There's no time to think, only to adjust. He's up again. Angry now. He swings wide, reckless. You duck. Counter, catch his ribs. He grunts. A sound that's more animal than man. The arena narrows. Not physically, but in your mind. The crowd vanishes. The sky. Forgotten. There is only this circle. This man. This rhythm of breath and blood. He lands a blow. You don't remember the motion. Just the impact. A burst of stars across your vision. You taste metal. Your knees buckle. But you stay upright. Because falling here is an invitation. Time fractures. Seconds become years, or maybe less than heartbeats. He presses. You yield. He swings. You duck. He roars. You whisper inside your own skull. Wait. Now. And when now comes, you don't think. You move. Shield low. Sword high. A feint, a twist, a strike, and his helmet jerks sideways. He's dazed. You close in. The blade finds his shoulder. Deep. Real. He cries out. The crowd does too. Blood pulses. Not a stream, a warning. He stumbles, kneels, and there it is. The stillness again. So sudden it deafens. He drops his weapon. You stand over him, sword raised. The decision is not yours. You look up. The Emperor's box is quiet. A woman fans herself. A boy claps without understanding. Then the hand lifts. Thumb out, the crowd begins to chant. Not a name, not a word, just rhythm. Life or death. Today, life. The thumb turns up. You lower your blade, breathe, and your knees finally give. They carry him away. You walk, barely. The sand clings to your wounds. The sun scorches the blood on your back. But you're not dead. That counts for something. Back in the tunnels, you sit. Not on a throne, but on stone. You remove your helmet. Your vision swims. Someone offers you water. You drink without tasting it. Later, they'll tell you how well you fought, how clean your strikes were, how bold you looked when you pressed forward. They'll say, you showed heart. But you'll remember different things, the way your fingers slipped on your grip, the ache in your knees, the silence before the first charge, the sound of your own breath, and the only thing that told you, I'm still here. You survived. But the sand does not care. It is swept clean before the next fight, erasing all trace of your pain, all but what remains in you. You never get used to the pause. It's not the crowd that makes your heart twist. It's the silence. The stillness that settles just after the final strike, when dust hangs midair and breath catches in the lungs of thousands. When the sword is raised and the fallen lies bleeding at your feet, that is the moment Rome holds its breath. And you hold yours too. Because now, the arena is no longer yours. Not your fight. Not your fate. Now, the Emperor decides. It begins the same way each time. You stand, arm raised, blade pointed toward the fallen. Your chest heaves. Blood trickles. Your vision dances at the edges. And still, you pose, because that's what's expected. You're not just a killer. You're an actor on Rome's grandest stage. The crowd wants resolution, a final act, a moral, even if stained in red. Your opponent lies on his back or knees, weaponless, exposed. He may plead, or stay still, or stare up at you, eyes not begging but resigned. You can feel it, his heartbeat pulsing through the air. Then, you look up. The Emperor is seated beneath a canopy, flanked by advisors, scribes, guards. His robe is immaculate, his face unreadable. Beside him, a servant fans the heat away. A senator leans close, offering comment. But the Emperor doesn't blink. He lifts his hand. And the Colosseum waits. What they don't tell you in the ludus is that this gesture, hurts more than any wound. Because it's not about justice, or valor, or rules. It's theater. It's whim. The crowd, too, weighs in. Sometimes they chant, Vita, Vita, life. Other times, Ugula, kill. Their voices form waves. They don't care who you are, only how much they felt. Did you make them gasp? Cheer? Did you bleed enough to earn mercy? Or kill too quickly to deserve it? Their thumbs guide the Emperor's, but only guide. The final verdict is his alone. And so comes the gesture. Upward or down. Pollis verso. The thumb turned. It is not as simple as stories claim. Some say Thumbs up means death. Others say the opposite. But in the moment, no one discusses symbolism. Everyone knows what was meant, and so do you. When the thumb points down, or sideways depending on the age, you strike. When it points up, you lower your weapon and walk away. But mercy is never clean. A spared man is still broken. He bleeds. He limps. He weeps when no one sees. Some die days later of wounds that fester quietly. Some return to the arena again and again until one day the thumb betrays them. There was one, you remember him, tall, fierce, almost joyful in battle. The crowd adored him. The emperor once toasted his name. But then, one afternoon, he hesitated, spared an opponent too soon, or killed too cruelly. No one knew. The next match, the crowd turned, and the emperor listened. The thumb dropped, and the cheer was thunderous. You wonder often, what makes a thumb fall? Is it boredom, a poor mood, politics, or just the ancient truth? Rome must be fed, and blood is easy to serve. Back in the barracks, you rarely speak of it. The gesture, the pause. It's a ghost that lives in every man's mind. You see it in the eyes of those who survived. The way they glance at their own hands, not in pride, but in confusion. They were spared. But what part of them died, waiting for the thumb? Sometimes, in dreams, you see the emperor's hand again, rising, turning, but you never see which way it points. You always wake before it ends. And maybe that's mercy too. At first, you tell yourself it's just survival. You swing the blade because you must. You press your weight into the shield because the alternative is to fall. You kill because someone told you to, and the world rewarded you for obeying. But over time, the lines blur. What was duty begins to feel like reflex. What was horror starts to feel familiar. You live in cycles now, fight, bleed, recover, repeat. And each time, something inside you tightens. Not like a wound, more like a knot being pulled. Slowly, relentlessly. You begin to wonder, who are you when the crowd is gone? At night, the barracks are quiet. Most sleep. Some weep, muffled so that others won't hear. A few drink if they're lucky enough to have saved coin. Others stare at the ceiling, seeing nothing, not even the cracks. You lie awake, not from fear, that's long gone. From noise, but not around you, inside you. Your mind replays the matches, not as memories, but as sensations. The weight of a skull cracking beneath your blade. The sound of breath leaving a throat. The eyes, always the eyes. At the moment they know they've lost. They haunt you, but not in the way you expected. You don't feel guilt exactly. You feel something stranger, emptiness, like a jar refilled and poured out again, day after day, until the vessel itself wears thin. The trainers never mention it. Neither do the other fighters. But you see it in the man who forgets how to speak unless shouted at, in the one who flinches when touched, even in kindness, in the veteran who once fought like a god and now wets himself before every match. The body recovers faster than the mind. Rome knows this. It patches you up, oils your skin, sharpens your blade, sends you back, but it never asks, what have you lost? You begin to lose your name. People call you Murmillo, Victor, the wolf. You answer, because what else is there? The name you were born with, the one whispered by your mother once, long ago, fades like a dream chased from morning light. You start to avoid the mirror, not because of your scars, but because your eyes are changing. They used to look for a way out. Now, they look for threats, even in silence, even in sleep. You no longer dream of freedom. You dream of combat, of noise, of the moment just before a strike lands, when everything feels clear, when the world narrows into purpose. And when you wake, you miss that clarity. That's when you know. The arena has crept inside you. It doesn't wait for your body anymore. It lives in your thoughts. One day, a new recruit asks you, does it get easier? You want to laugh, not cruelly, just truthfully, because he thinks you're strong. He sees your calm, your precision, your silence, and believes it's peace. But it's not. It's adaptation. And adaptation is just the body's way of forgetting what pain feels like. Until it doesn't. You tell him nothing. You tighten his greaves. You nod once and walk away. They give you coins for your wins. Sometimes even silk or scented oil. You trade them for wine, food, or quiet. But none of it buys back your soul. That was sold the first time the crowd cheered as you stood over a dying man and liked the way it felt. Not joy, not pride, something colder, satisfaction maybe, the kind Rome teaches best. You wonder if there's life after this. Not in death, not the afterlife sung about by priests, but after the arena. If you were freed, truly, who would you be? Could you live in peace? Hold a child without measuring its weight like a shield? Sleep beside someone without wondering if they'll betray you in the dark? Could you laugh again, not like a bark, not like a reaction, but truly? You don't know. And the not knowing aches more than any wound. Sometimes you stare at your sword before a match. It's clean, polished, deadly. You wonder if it remembers. If steel carries memory like bone does. Does it resent being held again? Or has it too accepted the rhythm? The arena wants warriors, but it breeds ghosts. Ghosts who walk with eyes open, who eat, sleep, and train, but who left parts of themselves behind every time they heard a cheer. You're one of them now. You don't fight because you hate. You fight because it's all you remember how to do. There comes a moment, not during battle, but after, when someone calls you a legend. It catches you off guard. Not because it's untrue, but because it's unfamiliar. You don't feel like a legend. You feel like a man who barely slept, who has sand in his wounds, who smells of iron and oil. But in Rome, perception is everything. And Rome has decided you are more than flesh. You are myth. The strange part is, you never asked to be. It starts with the murmurs. Vendors in the forum naming you between sales of figs and amphorae. Children carving your figure in wax. Graffiti etched on alley walls. Your name beside a crudely drawn sword. Even the lanista starts referring to you not by number but by title. The bear, the storm, the one who cannot be felled. You become story before you can stop it. And stories in Rome are valuable. The state takes notice. A senator requests your presence at a banquet. Not to eat, but to be seen. You stand in armor while others drink, a living centerpiece to their wealth and control. They ask you questions they don't wait to hear answered. Do you enjoy it? Were you always so disciplined? Isn't it better than where you came from? You nod, because that's safer. But inside, something clenches. They are painting you into a narrative, one where brutality becomes virtue, and survival is framed as gratitude. Soon your face appears on pottery, painted banners, even coins if you're lucky enough or dangerous enough to warrant one. The irony is sharp. You were born without rights, sold, branded, trained to kill. And now, your likeness is currency. People wear your image like a charm. They cheer when you appear in the streets. They speak of you as if you're divine. Some even offer prayers to you, as if you could save them, as if you weren't trying to save yourself. You learn that Rome loves its gladiators in the same way it loves fire, from a distance, with awe, until it gets too close. Then it smothers. The propaganda runs deeper than you thought. In plays, you are reimagined as the embodiment of Roman values, virtus, disciplina, pietas. A hero who rises from savagery to embody civilization. But the truth is far more human. You fight not for Rome, but for survival. You train not to serve an ideal, but to avoid punishment. You kill not because of honor, but because you weren't given a choice. Still, Rome edits. Rome prefers a gladiator who embraces the cage. The emperor sends word. He has heard of you. A compliment, a warning. It doesn't matter. From now on, your matches are announced with fanfare. Poets recite your feats. Artists draw you not as you are, bruised, exhausted, human, but as something eternal. Sculpted abs, windswept hair, eyes of fury and justice. You laugh once when you see the bust. It doesn't look like you, but it will outlast you. That is the cruelest trick. Myth lives longer than memory. Long after your body is dust, they will still speak your name. They will forget your voice, your fear, your pain, but remember the way you stood after a kill. They will say you were noble, that you chose this life, that you were grateful. They will use your story to justify the next generation of cages. And yet, part of you clings to it, because what else is there? If the world insists on calling you a legend, maybe, just maybe, you can hide inside the myth. Maybe it can protect the slivers of your soul that still remember something softer. A childhood, a home, a name. One evening, before a match, a scribe comes to record your words. He asks, "What would you like future Romans to know about you?" You pause. You could tell him everything. That you were stolen, beaten, made into a tool. That you hated the roar of the crowd. That you longed for silence. That you feared the moment after victory more than any blade. But instead you say, "I fought well," because that's what they want. And sometimes it's easier to become the myth than to fight it. They cheer your name. From the stands, in the streets, even in the dark corners of Rome's underbelly, where wine flows and the scent of cheap incense coils through the air. You're known. But when the crowd leaves, when the last applause fades, and the sand lies still again, you remain in chains. Fame, you've learned, is not freedom. It's decoration for your cage. Some call you lucky, and perhaps, by certain cruel standards, you are. You're not in the mines, not on a galley, not bent over in a vineyard field until your spine forgets how to stretch. You're famous. You're admired. You're not free. There is a word passed among fighters like a prayer. Rudis, a wooden sword, simple and polished. It is not meant for combat. It means something else entirely. Freedom. It is the symbol given to a gladiator who has fought and won enough to earn release. But the truth, whispered late at night when the wine loosens tongues, is that Rudy's is rare, almost mythical. Some fight for years, dozens of matches. They survive, they bleed, they entertain, and still die in the sand before ever touching one. The crowd does not want you to go. You are property, spectacle, a valuable asset in a blood economy. And yet, the idea lingers. You've seen it happen once. An older fighter, calloused hands, quiet eyes. No victories left in him, but too popular to waste. They handed him the wooden sword before a match. A grand ceremony, trumpets, laurel wreath. He cried, the kind of tears that don't fall. They rise caught behind the eyes like a flood trapped behind stone. Afterward, he disappeared. No one knew where he went. Some said he bought a tavern. Others claimed he left Rome entirely. A few swore they saw him beg for food near the Subura, unrecognized, forgotten. Freedom, it turns out, doesn't come with instructions. You begin to imagine it. What would you do? Walk beyond the gates of the ludus? No guards shadowing your steps. No orders barked at dawn. No blade waiting in your dreams. Would you find your birthplace? Would anyone remember you? Would you remember them? Or would you wander, haunted by applause you can no longer hear? There's another story. A freed man, once a legend in the arena, returned to fight again by choice, not for coin, not for honor, because he didn't know how to live without it. They say he died in the sand, smiling. You don't know if that's truth or another myth Rome tells to keep its legends close. Sometimes patrons offer to buy your freedom, but the price is steep and rarely paid. Even when they love you, even when they desire you, they hesitate. Because what's more thrilling than watching a caged beast dance on command? Letting it go? That's not part of the show. You hold a coin in your hand one night, heavy, gold, a gift after a flawless victory. You stare at it for a long time. You could save it, build towards something, or trade it tomorrow for a flask of wine and 1 hour with someone who whispers your name like it matters. You do the latter. Because in Rome, hope is expensive, and wine is easier to hold. Still, the thought returns. Not every night, but often enough. The Rudy's, that sword of wood. What would it feel like pressed into your palm? Would you grip it tight like a blade? Or would you drop it disbelieving? Would it feel lighter than your weapons? Or heavier than all your years? Freedom. They say it comes after blood, after loyalty, after endurance. But maybe it only comes for those Rome tires of. And you, bruised, broken, beloved, are not forgotten yet. So you keep training, keep performing, keep bleeding. Because as long as they remember your name, they still own you. They don't tell you this in training, that the hardest part isn't the pain. It's the loneliness. Even surrounded by men, even cheered by thousands, there's a silence in you that no roar can touch. Because when your name is called, it's just you. When the gate opens, just you. When the sword rises, just you. But still, you'll long for something else. Not applause, not victory. A hand, a voice, a moment not shaped by violence. You long for love, or something like it. In the barracks, no one speaks of it openly. Desire is weakness, they say. Affection is a distraction. But in quiet moments, between drills, between bruises, it appears. A touch that lingers too long. A look held just a moment more. The way two men laugh in the corner, their voices lower than necessary. There are no rules about it. At least, not ones enforced with whips. The lanista cares about your strength, not who warms your mat. But nothing here is free of consequence. Attachments are dangerous. You might be sent into battle against the one you shared bread with the night before. Or worse, you survive, and they don't. Still, the heart doesn't listen to logic. In a world where death watches every breath, affection becomes sacred. There was a woman once. You don't remember her name, only her scent, jasmine, and something sharper. She worked in the kitchens, sometimes brought water to the yard. She never spoke to you directly, until one day, she left a fig beside your bedroll. That was all. But in a place built on screams, that fig was a symphony. You didn't eat it. You kept it under your mat until it rotted, just to hold on a little longer. Others find comfort where they can. A fellow fighter, a healer's apprentice, a slave from another house who sneaks in at night. There are stories, whispered, always, of gladiators who loved like poets, who wrote verses on scraps of parchment, who promised to survive just one more match for the sake of someone's smile. And sometimes it's not love, but memory, the thought of a child, far away, a wife, a brother, a friend whose face you trace in the sand when no one's watching. These are anchors, and anchors matter when the sea inside you is made of blood. You hear laughter one evening, real laughter. Two men in the corner sharing a joke. One leans into the other. Their heads touch. You look away, not from shame, but from reverence. That kind of joy, it's rare here. You don't want to disturb it. Love in the ludus is quiet. Its fingers brushing while sparring. It's patching a wound with extra care. It's sitting beside someone after a match, not speaking, just breathing together. No promises, no futures, just now. You once saw a man carry a broken comb for months. It was hers, he said. A gift before he was taken. He died in the arena, that comb in his grip. They buried him with it. Small mercies, in a city that doesn't believe in mercy. And then there are the ones who come to you, not for love, for fantasy. Wealthy patrons, bored wives, curious citizens who want to touch danger and call it desire. They enter the barracks veiled, perfumed, draped in silks. They leave with your sweat on their skin. You learn to separate the body from the soul, to give one and guard the other. But sometimes, even that barrier breaks. There was one who looked at you differently, not as a fighter, not as a prize, just as a man. She traced the scar on your shoulder like it was a map, asked what it cost you, waited for the answer. You never gave it. But in her silence, you found something close to peace. She never returned. Maybe her husband found out. Maybe she couldn't bear it. Maybe she loved you and knew that was the most dangerous thing of all. You never asked. Some losses are gentler when unnamed. You don't know if love can survive here. Not fully, not forever, but it visits, like sunlight between clouds, brief, warm, vanishing, and in a world that teaches you only to take, the memory of something given, freely, softly, stays longer than any wound. You woke up knowing. There was no voice, no omen, no whisper from the gods. Just a stillness, the kind that drapes itself across your bones, that waits behind your eyes. It was different from dread. You've known dread, that acidic churn before a match, the kind that sharpens breath and blurs thought. No, This was quieter, not fear, not even grief, just certainty. Today you would bleed for the last time. The morning routine felt distant, as if your body moved ahead of you. The oil on your skin, the buckles tightened across your chest, the leather smelling of sweat and iron. You moved like a puppet through the rituals of readiness, but your mind wandered. Not to the match, to the sky, to a river you once bathed in, to someone's laughter you can't quite place anymore. To the first time your hands held a weapon and shook. There was no special announcement, no fanfare for a final breath. The emperor wasn't even present today. A lesser official presided. The crowd was thinner, distracted. Many came just to pass the afternoon. But to you, every moment echoed louder. The scrape of your sandal against stone, the creak of the gate, the way the sand glared white in the sun. Your opponent was young. Not new, but young. His armor still shone. His movements had energy, but lacked weight. He struck her fast, too fast. You parried easily at first, dodged, tested. You could have ended it quickly, but something in you hesitated. Not pity, not fear. Just fatigue, not in the body, but in the soul. They say the final wound doesn't always hurt. Yours burned like fire. He caught your side just under the ribs. A clean hit. Not deep enough to drop you, but deep enough to change the pace. You fell back. He came forward. The crowd stirred. You countered, moved, ducked, bled, and then stumbled. Your leg gave out, just a twitch. But that was all he needed. The blade slipped beneath your guard, into the soft part of you. You gasped, not in shock, but in understanding. So this is it. Not a storm, not a collapse. A single perfect silence. You fell. Not gracefully, not like a hero, like a man whose body could no longer hold his life. The sand welcomed you like an old friend. Grain against your cheek. Warmth soaking through your armor. You heard the crowd. They weren't cheering, not yet. They waited for the gesture, the thumb. You didn't look up. You didn't need to. The pause was long enough. And then a murmur, a decision. Thumb, down. You remember thinking, let it be fast. And it was. A shadow moved beside you. Then light. Then nothing. Later, they dragged your body from the arena. The sand was raked, blood absorbed. The next fight began. You were not mentioned again. No tribute, no poem, no moment of silence. The crowd had more wagers to place. The empire had more flesh to burn. They buried you outside the city walls with others. Some marked, some not. If you were lucky, someone etched your name into stone. If not, then time will smooth the dirt above you and silence your story. But not entirely, because you lived. And while the world forgets, the sand remembers. Perhaps, in another time, another place, someone will find the bones of your wrist, the curve of your rib, a scar etched in stone that doesn't match the records. They'll ask, who was this? And the answer won't be a name. It will be a feeling of strength, of pain, of breath stolen too soon, of a life given to entertain a restless empire. You weren't a hero. You weren't a monster. You were human. And for a moment, under the sun, in the roar, in the silence, you were seen. Beneath Rome, there is another Rome. A city of silence. A map not drawn with roads, but with bones. They don't speak of it in the forums under the marble colonnades or inside perfumed atriums. Death especially of those who bled for sport, is not something the Empire lingers on. The crowd forgets quickly, but the earth remembers everything. You are carried out the same way as all the others, stripped, washed, wrapped loosely in cloth. No armor, no honors, just limbs made quiet and still. They bring you to the edge of the city, not into it. The law forbids burial within the sacred walls. Death must remain on the outside, like guilt too heavy to carry home. There is a stretch of road, the Via Appia, lined with tombs of the rich and powerful. Imposing stones, carved faces, epigraphs that sing of conquest, lineage, eternal virtue. You pass those and keep walking. At the outskirts, past vineyards and dust, there are other tombs, smaller, unmarked. Some are pits, hastily dug. Others are niches carved into communal walls. Here lie the unclaimed, the unnamed, the unfavored. Many of them were gladiators, once cheered, now stacked like amphorae. Some laniste pay for simple burials, a name scratched into clay. A few coins placed with the body, Charon's fee, in case the old myths were true. Others don't bother. The arena consumes coin as quickly as it does flesh. Why invest in a corpse? You served your purpose. The show moved on, but not all were forgotten. Sometimes fellow fighters pool their winnings to pay for a tomb. There's a plot behind a small shrine where gladiators go when they're not training. No priests, just silence. They kneel, they pour wine, they speak names too softly for the wind to hear. It's a kind of ritual, a quiet defiance against the forgetting. Your tombstone might read, "To the shade of Flavius, once a Murmillo. He fought bravely. He died young. May the earth rest softly on him." Or it might not exist at all. Your name might survive only in the memory of a comrade, in the fading scar on someone's wrist, in a dream someone wakes from, not knowing why they're crying. Centuries from now, your bones might be found. Archaeologists will puzzle over the healed fractures, the dense muscle attachments, the grooves on your ribs from repeated strikes. They'll write papers, make theories. Likely a gladiator, they'll say. Middle-aged, died from abdominal trauma, possibly revered in his time. They won't know your favorite food, or your laugh, or the way your fingers twitched before each match. The subsoil of Rome is layered in forgotten greatness, not the kind carved in triumphal arches, but the quiet kind. The kind that stood in the sand, raised a shield, and chose again and again to rise, even when the body begged not to. Somewhere beneath the city, a tooth with a notch, a femur with an old break, a rusted fragment of a blade. Your story is scattered across the dirt, like ash after a long fire. But the fire mattered. And even ash can whisper. If someone were to kneel there beside your grave, they wouldn't hear much. No music, no words, just a breeze through the grass, a breath in the stone, a reminder that even the most forgotten lives shape the empire that forgot them. Even at its peak, not everyone in Rome applauded the games. Not every cheer was wholehearted. Not every citizen looked at the Colosseum with pride. There were whispers, then murmurs, then voices low and cautious asking, "What have we become?" From the shadows of marble temples and smoky tabernae, dissent emerged. Subtle at first, a raised eyebrow, a hand that refused to bet. A child who asked, "Why does he have to die?" Some poets stopped writing about valor and blood. Some wrote elegies for the unnamed dead. Some, brave or foolish, dared to speak in the Senate. Seneca, the philosopher, once wrote, "I left the arena sickened, not by what I saw, but by how much I enjoyed it." He knew that the games didn't just brutalize the body, they seduced the mind. They made cruelty look like justice. Others began to echo him. Quietly, a merchant who refused to sponsor a bout even when it hurt his business. A senator's wife who covered her ears during the executions. A former soldier who, after witnessing one too many beheadings, swore never to return. They weren't martyrs, just people, tired of pretending that death was beautiful. The empire didn't silence them directly. It didn't need to. The crowd did that. With laughter, with ridicule, with shouts of "un-Roman" and "coward." And still, the unease grew. It was hard to ignore the smell. After a day of games, the city stank of blood and sweat and rotting flesh. Animals left half-eaten. Bodies burned or buried in haste. The Colosseum wasn't just a place of spectacle. It was a wound. A place where the earth opened, drank deeply, and waited for more. Some said the gods wept, that Jupiter turned his gaze elsewhere, that Mars, god of war, had grown ashamed of what men did in his name. Superstition spread. Some refused to sit in the front rows. Some claimed to hear voices in the stone at night, groans, cries, whispers too soft to chase away. A young boy once dropped a toy in the arena sand. He climbed down to retrieve it during intermission. He came back, pale. "I heard someone calling me," he said. "There's no one there," the guards insisted. But he wouldn't speak for days after. Eventually, cracks began to show. Not in the stone, but in the soul of the city. Attendance dipped, cheers softened. More citizens asked questions. Why must men die for our amusement? Why must suffering be made into art? Isn't there glory in peace? The rise of a new faith stirred the embers. A man nailed to a cross. A message of mercy, forgiveness, compassion for the weak. Early Christians did not cheer in the stands. They hid. They mourned. They prayed for those condemned. Some even died there, not as fighters, but as sacrifices. The Colosseum swallowed them too. Rome didn't fall in a day, but in the quiet between the games, something shifted. A discomfort took root. A sense that perhaps the empire was losing not its armies, but its soul. One evening, long after the final match, a senator walked through the empty amphitheater. He ran his fingers along the seats. He looked at the center ring, now dark and silent, and he whispered, not to anyone, but to the stone itself. "We built this to make gods of men, but it made ghosts instead." And Rome, though mighty, began to listen. Not all at once, but slowly, because even the loudest roars fade, and even the strongest cities bleed. The Colosseum didn't fall in a blaze. It faded. Not with a scream, but with the long, slow exhale of an empire forgetting how to hold its breath. What was once thunder and glory became dust and wind, and silence. For centuries, it stood empty. The crowds vanished. The gladiators were gone. The emperors, too, replaced by popes, bishops, warlords. No more cheers, no more blood, only the whisper of time brushing against stone. Nature crept in first. Grass poked through cracks in the marble. Moss softened the steps where once sandals stomped. Birds nested where nobles once sat. Rain wore grooves into the walls like tears etched by the sky itself. Animals came too. Goats grazed in the lower tiers. Owls hunted under the vaults. Foxes wandered the tunnels, once soaked with human cries. Then came the scavengers. Rome, wounded and starving after invasions and collapses, turned inward. The city picked its own bones. Marble was stripped to build churches. Iron clamps wrenched from the stone to forge weapons. Brick by brick, the Colosseum was unmade by the same hands that once cheered within it. But still, it stood, weakened, hollowed but upright, a skeleton of memory, a monument that no longer remembered what it was built for. By the Middle Ages, it was a ruin. Locals believed it haunted. They told stories of ghosts in armor, of shadows dueling beneath the moonlight, of groans echoing up from the earth, not wind, but voices. Some said it was cursed. Others called it sacred. A few built homes in its arches. Whole families lived inside the old arena. Laundry fluttered where banners once flew. Children played games where lions once killed. A baker lit his oven where blood once steamed in the sun. No one called it the Colosseum anymore. It became simply the arena, or the place with bones. Its past faded into myth. Then the church stepped in. Pope Benedict XIV in the 18th century declared the site holy, a place where Christian martyrs had died. No proof was offered, but it didn't matter. A new story had taken hold, one of sacrifice, not spectacle, suffering, not sport. The Colosseum was reborn, not as a monument to empire, but to endurance. They placed a cross at its center, marked the stations of the cross along its edges. Each Good Friday, pilgrims walked the same paths where once men fell for applause. Now they walk in silence and weep. Tourists came later, with maps and cameras. They marveled at the arches, took photos of the hypogum, the underground chambers once crawling with beasts and prisoners. They asked guides, "How many died here?" And guides answered with numbers. Tens of thousands, maybe more. But the real answer was never in the figures. It was in the dust, the silence, the weight. If you stand in the arena today, in the very center, and close your eyes, you might hear it. Not screams, not steel, but breath, the breath of memory. The pulse of the earth holding stories that refuse to disappear. A poet once wrote, "Here, the past sleeps not in peace, but in sand." The Colosseum is no longer hungry, but it remembers hunger. It no longer cheers, but it echoes the sound. It does not speak, but if you listen closely, it hums. With all the lives given to it, all the stories lost within it, and all the silence that now protects them, stone remembers what people forget. Long after the voices are gone, after names fade and scripts crumble, the walls remain. They whisper, not loudly, but insistently. And if you run your hand along the old arches of the Colosseum, you'll feel it. A language carved not in Latin, but in loss. It begins with scratches, little more than lines, etched by fingernails, bits of metal or bone. They're not decorative, not artistic, just marks. A tally, perhaps, a day counted, a name spelled slowly by someone who didn't want to disappear. In the hypogum, beneath the arena floor, there are grooves in the walls, where men sharpened blades, or paced in nervous loops, or simply traced the same path 100 times to remember they were still alive. Each mark is a breath, fossilized. Some stones hold full inscriptions, carved deeper, letters you can still read. Marcus, Vixit, Fortiter, Marcus, he lived, bravely. Flavia, Te amo. Flavia, I love you. Libertas. Freedom, a single word. Spelled out again and again in corners where no one was meant to look. But there are other marks, ones deliberately erased, names chipped away, symbols destroyed, like Rome itself grew ashamed of what it created, or afraid. Afraid that by reading those names, someone might start to care. A fragment was found near a column once. Just 4 words. He did not scream. No date, no name, just that. A sentence soft as a prayer, hard as truth. Who was he? No one knows. But someone wanted the world to remember that in the end, he met it with silence. Somewhere high in the stone seating, behind what used to be the equestrian tier, someone carved a tiny heart. Inside it, 2 initials. S plus C, not gladiators maybe, just lovers or friends. Or 2 souls who paused during the roar and said, even here, I see you. Modern archaeologists use lights and lenses to study these remnants. They catalog, photograph, record. They speak in terms of pigment analysis and spatial stratigraphy. But sometimes they go quiet, not because of awe, but because a simple line carved by a trembling hand 2,000 years ago says more than any textbook ever could. The Colosseum's stones have absorbed centuries of footsteps. Emperors, merchants, prisoners, pilgrims, and beneath them all, the fighters, the ones who built nothing, ruled nothing, but who gave everything. Their names do not fill books, but they linger. In initials, in scratches, in the worn place where a man once knelt before a match and whispered to no one. You might walk past them, miss them. Most people do. They take their pictures, comment on the architecture, marvel at the size, and leave, never knowing that between the cracks, stories are still being told. But if you return, quietly, and press your hand to the wall, you might feel a pulse, faint, steady, a heartbeat left behind. And in that heartbeat, a question. Do you remember me? Let's leave the sand for a moment. Let's leave the dust, the iron, the echo of 1,000 screams. Let's come back to now, to soft beds, to electric light, to screens glowing in the dark, showing us stories, faces, wars, all from a safe distance. Now ask yourself, would you survive if it were you? Not in the physical sense, not the sword, not the heat, but the rhythm, the discipline, the obedience, the cage. Would you wake before dawn every day knowing that what lay ahead was sweat, pain, violence, and applause? Could you give up your name? Forget your dreams? Let your body become a tool, your life a performance. We like to think we're different, that we've outgrown cruelty, that we are modern, enlightened. But are we? Or have the arenas simply changed shape? We no longer sit in marble stands, but we still watch, still cheer, still demand entertainment in pixels now, in curated drama, in curated pain. We scroll through feeds filled with conflict, collapse, humiliation, and we pause, we comment, we consume. We don't see blood, but we know it's there, and we move on. Because the algorithm, like the emperor's thumb, must decide what survives. What if your failures were public, your exhaustion performed? What if every mistake, every misstep were replayed again and again, not for correction, but for content? Would you endure? Would you adapt? Or would you break beneath the weight of being watched? There are moments in modern life that echo ancient rhythms. The pressure to perform, the hunger to be seen, the constant evaluation by strangers. We're no longer slaves in a ludus, but we trade hours for survival, attention for validation, exhaustion for brief moments of praise. And like the gladiators, we're told to smile while we do it, to keep the mask on, to keep swinging. Yet even then, we look back. We look at those fighters, those lives scorched into stone, and wonder, how did they endure? Maybe because they had no choice. Or maybe, and this is harder to admit, maybe they found meaning in the fight, not in the death, but in the moments between, the discipline, the connection, the tiny rebellions, a shared joke, a carved name, a glance before the blade. They were owned, but not always broken. You might not last a day in the arena, but perhaps you already know what it feels like to perform when you're exhausted. To keep going when every part of you begs to stop. To feel unseen, even when everyone is watching. Perhaps that's the link. Not blood, not spectacle, but survival. The Colosseum asked its fighters to give everything. We don't ask that of ourselves, do we? Or do we? When we chase deadlines until we forget how to breathe. When we present perfect faces to a world that values performance over truth. When we silence pain to keep the show running. And so the question lingers. If your life were placed in the sand, before a crowd, beneath a sky that expected you to fall, would you rise? Even once? Would you fight? Even knowing the thumb could drop? Would you, with trembling hands and tired breath, look up and whisper, "Not today"? Maybe you would. Not for glory, not for applause, but because something inside you refuses to stay down. Because even in a world built to use you, you remember who you are, even when they try to make you forget. And maybe that's the final truth the gladiators left behind. That survival, even quiet, even bruised, is a kind of rebellion, and the act of standing again and again is a kind of courage. No name remains on his grave. No statue bears his face. No poem echoes his deeds. No lineage follows his blood. But still, he was. And in this last hour, let's give him a story. Not the kind carved in marble, the kind made of shadow and breath. He was born under a sky that smelled of olive trees and dust. A mother held him once. A father carved wood by firelight. He ran barefoot, laughed often, had a scar above his eye from falling out of a fig tree. They called him Lucius. He had no idea his name would vanish one day. He was taken young, a raid, a debt, a punishment. The reason doesn't matter now. Only the result. Chained, branded, sold. He arrived in Rome with wrists raw and hope crumbling like bread in the sun. He was strong. So they trained him. They did not ask who he missed or what he dreamed of. Only, can he fight? And he could. Not because he loved it, but because he learned to breathe through pain, to listen between the shouts, to survive quietly, deliberately, like a plant growing through stone. He made no records, but someone carved a small wolf near his bunk. They say it was him. Quiet, fierce, alone, but never broken. In the arena, he fought 10 matches, won 7, lost 2, survived all, until the last. No one remembers the day. Not the crowd, not the official, not the opponent. Only that it rained lightly, and the blood mixed with mud in a way that made the sand look bruised. They buried him that night, quickly, a coin on each eye, a piece of cloth wrapped around his hand. A friend, maybe, or a stranger, someone who couldn't let him go into the dark completely naked. Centuries passed. Empires crumbled. Languages changed. But that grave, unmarked, shallow, lonely, endured. Until a team of workers unearthed it while digging for pipes near the edge of the old city. A skeleton, partial. One wrist fractured. One rib cracked clean through. They labeled it Unknown Gladiator, approx. 1st century CE, and moved on. But before they filled the earth back in, a student paused. She ran her fingers along the jawbone, closed her eyes, and said softly, "I hope you weren't alone." That's all he gets. Not marble, not epic, just that sentence, and this one. Because now, you remember him. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. Maybe that's all any of us get. Not immortality, not greatness, just remembrance, in passing, in story, in the hush of a night where someone listens, even briefly, and says, "I see you. And if you ever visit Rome and walk through the Colosseum in the soft light of evening, run your hand along the stones. Lean in. Listen. There's a name there. You won't hear it. But it's spoken just the same. In silence, in shadow, in the space where story lives. Sleep well now, and dream not of empires, but of the small, quiet souls who once lived, fought, loved, and endured beneath them. And may your own name, whispered someday in passing, echo with tenderness, like theirs, before the crowds, before the blade, before the scream. There was another sound in the arena, a growl, a snort, the patting of paws against stone. They called them bestia, beasts, but they were more than that. They were lions, panthers, elephants, bears, creatures pulled from every corner of the empire and thrown into cages beneath the Colosseum. Rome didn't just conquer people, it conquered nature, and then made it perform. Some came by ship, chained, drugged, starved, covered in burlap and urine, pulled from African plains, Asian forests, northern peaks. They were paraded through streets before the games. The pride of Rome, the announcers said. Exotic wonders. But the people didn't see majesty. They saw hunger and danger and entertainment. In the hypogym, the animals were stored like supplies, each in their own wooden pen, trembling or pacing or silent. You could smell them before you saw them. Musk, fear, rotting meat. The keepers poked them with sticks, starved them just enough to ensure frenzy, released them on cue. Sometimes the beasts were set upon unarmed criminals, sometimes against gladiators, and sometimes against each other. There was a lion they called Aquila, massive, old, with a single eye and a limp that made the crowd cheer harder. He'd been in over a dozen matches, survived them all. They said he once killed 3 men in a single bout, that his roar echoed so loud, the arena went quiet. Then, one day, he didn't come out of his cage. He simply lay down, would not rise, no wounds, no illness, just stillness, as if even the wild knew when the soul was done. You remember the first time you faced a beast. Not in the arena, in training. They brought in a sick wolf to test your nerves. It snarled once, then collapsed. The trainer laughed, but you didn't, because even then, you saw the truth. This wasn't a fight. It was theater built on hunger. Some gladiators hated it. They didn't mind dying by another man's hand. but to die in the jaws of something that didn't choose to be there. That felt different, wrong. Even here, surrounded by cruelty, there were still lines that made the soul recoil. Once, during a match, you watched a bear hesitate. It looked at its opponent, a man who had once been a soldier, and didn't attack. It simply stood there, breathing, until a handler stabbed it from behind. And then it did what pain demands. It killed. After the match, the sand was hosed, the beast was dragged, the man buried, and the show continued. Centuries later, archaeologists find teeth in the soil, claws, skull fragments, mixed with human bones. They marvel at the logistics, the architecture, the engineering, but few stop to ask, did they suffer? Did they know? You dream sometimes of those creatures, not in nightmares, in quiet, a lion walking the empty halls, a hawk circling the ruins, a panther curled in the emperor's box, watching, waiting, not for prey, but for peace. If you stand in the hippodrome now, in the dark, and listen, you might hear them. Not in roars, but in silence. The silence of beings that were never meant to be caged, and whose ghosts still walk beside ours. Not every life in the arena held a sword. Not every soul who walked the tunnels trained to kill. There were others, dozens, maybe hundreds, whose hands never wrapped around a weapon but still bore the weight of the Colosseum. This is their story. Start with the Medici, the healers. Not doctors, not in the noble sense. They were slaves, freedmen, some former fighters themselves. They stitched wounds quickly, without pity. Reset bones by lantern light. Cleaned blood from armor and sand from gashes. They carried vinegar, honey, herbs. But their greatest tool was silence. Because gladiators rarely cried, but when they did, it was here. With the medicus under the arches where no crowd could see. One of them, you remember, was named Titus. He had a limp and smelled of rosemary. He never asked questions, only cleaned your cuts and whispered, "Still breathing?" Then it wasn't your day yet. He buried more men than most soldiers and remembered each one, not with tears, but by keeping his hands steady. Then there were the Laniste, the managers, traders of flesh and spectacle, not fighters themselves, but shrewd, cold, calculating. They bought, sold, trained. They knew the names of every beast, every man, every debt. They decided who lived and who made better profit dead. Some were cruel, others were just tired. Tired of numbers, of watching boys become tools, of pretending it wasn't their doing. You once heard one sob behind a column after a match. He thought he was alone. You never mentioned it. What of the armorers? The smiths who sharpened your blades, hammered your helms, fitted greaves to your shins. They worked in heat and silence, crafting instruments of survival or death. They weren't paid much, but they knew every inch of you. They saw how your left pauldron drooped when you were tired. They noticed the tremor in your fingers long before you did. They never spoke of your matches, only of balance, of metal, of how a blade must sing before it bites. Then came the scribes, the ones who wrote your name in the program scrolls, who etched it into ledgers, who perhaps chose whether to spell it with one I or two. They made you real and erasable. And the sweepers, the lowest, the ones with brooms and buckets who raked sand after blood soaked through it. They saw every fight, but only through their tasks. They were the last to see the dead before burial, and sometimes when no one watched, they paused to place a hand on a still chest, to whisper a name softly, because someone had to. Not everyone in the arena was strong, but all of them were needed. It was a machine. Blood in, coin out. And each cog, from the medic's salve to the boy who fetched water, held the empire together. They are never remembered. No statues, no songs, but they were there. Every match, every scream, every silence after. And if the Colosseum still breathes, even now, it's because those forgotten hands once cared for its lungs and kept it from collapsing under the weight of its own brutality. What happens when the empire sleeps? When the crowds are gone, the vendors hushed, the sun long set behind the Palatine Hill. What remains of the Colosseum? In the quiet? At night, Rome breathes differently. The marble cools. The wind slips through broken arches like a whisper. The great arena, once a furnace of noise and heat, becomes still. It is not empty. It dreams. Some say ghosts walk here, that figures in armor pace the corridors, blades loose in their hands, no longer seeking blood, only memory, that you can hear the thud of sandals in the sandless pit, that a voice calls softly, asking, "Did I win?" But not all spirits cry. Some simply sit in the stands, on the stone ledges, where once they watched, now they rest. A stray cat winds its way through the shadows. It pauses where lions once leapt from trapdoors. It stretches in the dust, unconcerned with history. To the cat, the Colosseum is just warmth, a place of stone and silence, not suffering, not glory. Up above, the moonlight touches what torchlight once did. It casts soft silver across the same rows where senators once leaned in to place bets. Now, ivy climbs those stones. A different kind of audience. Still. Green. Growing. A poet sits on a bench outside the gates. Notebook open, ink smudged. He's not sure why he's here. Only that something about this place won't let go of him. He writes one word. Endurance, then waits, not for inspiration, but for permission, as if the ruins must nod before he continues. A child dreams nearby, in a small apartment down the hill. In her sleep, she sees men in armor, but they don't fight. They walk. One stops, smiles, hands her a flower made of bronze. When she wakes, she doesn't remember the dream, but she draws a circle on her school book, a perfect oval, and colors it in with red and gold. A couple passes by, holding hands. They pause. They don't speak. They simply look at the arches, tall and tired. And in that silence, they understand something neither of them can name, only feel. And still the Colosseum watches. It does not mourn. It does not celebrate. It holds everything. The noise and the hush. The blood and the breath. The roar and the rest. Some places are too full to be loud forever. Eventually, they must sleep. To digest what they've been fed. To let history settle like dust. To let new stories bloom in the cracks. When Rome sleeps, the Colosseum dreams. Not of battles, but of voices, soft ones. Yours, maybe. Mine, all of ours. Threaded together across time, saying, we were here. We mattered. Even when the world forgot. So if one day you stand outside its gates long after the crowds have left, breathe in, close your eyes, and listen. not for ghosts, but for peace. Because even the loudest places need silence to remember themselves.